Power prices is a significant issue. It's particularly a massive problem for people who, God forbid, own a business in this country, let alone make anything in this country. If power prices keep going up, and they will, and don't buy this garbage that it's all about the war in Ukraine, we have deliberately underspent on the technologies that work to build the technologies that might work into the future. The consequences of this, including 85% renewables in the next 8 years, that's the target that the Albanese government has in place, means you will pay for the transition. That means businesses will go out of business. And what is the federal government doing? Well, they're going to write a letter. This time, apparently, they're going to write to the Competition and Consumer Commission to somehow make sure that the power prices aren't being overdone at the moment. So put simply, they're not going to be able to do very much. And interestingly, the Resources Minister, who simultaneously is part of a government that will be cutting back on global emissions, but somehow says coal is part of our future forever, has actually been the one to tell the truth here about what Labor's plan is. Nothing. There's not much more any government could or should do, says the Resource Minister. So if that's the case, they've been lying to you all the way through the election campaign. As I told you about the media's laser-like obsession when it came to cost of living. It was mentioned in the 2 weeks before the election 93,000 times. It was barely 40,000 times in the 2 weeks after. Same as when interest rates went up during the federal election campaign. Breaking news lead story tonight. It was running after the Queen's Jubilee celebrations in the UK. The results for you, the consumer, you, the homeowner, you, the citizen, are just as bad as they were 4 weeks ago. But because there's not a political price to be paid here, somehow it changes in its importance, despite the fact that, due to government spending, higher inflation, interest rates could end up at almost 7% by this time next year. But there's also something I want to call out here, which is local government. Now, local government loves declaring things like climate emergencies, but they don't really want to do much about bringing down people's power bills. You see, there's a council in Victoria which declared a climate emergency last year. They are very proud about it. They not just crowed that they made that decision, but on their very own websites, they talk about the importance of tackling climate change together. But guess what happened when a bloke decided to put solar panels on his heritage-listed house? The same council told him he has to take them down. Because, of course, street appeal is all that's important. In the city of Sydney, they too have declared a climate emergency, but you're not allowed to have solar panels apparently facing the street. You can have them on the side of your house that doesn't face the street. We have, of course, the Tiffany Teals who demand great action on climate change, but have zero suggestions of how many wind farms they want to put on their local golf courses. All of these councils and many state governments that declare the emergency want to do bugger all to actually fix the problem. And the idea of going after somebody who is willing to fix the problem tells you everything about how seriously they actually take the problem. A bloke tried to cut his power bills. A bloke tried to cut his emissions. But his local council said, oh, but it's a heritage home. And they didn't have those when the joint was built 120 years ago. Please. These are the same local councils, by the way, that in parts of Melbourne are not allowing people to connect gas to their homes. These are all the people who believe that renewable energy isn't something that they need to do anything about. That's just for those awful people who live out in Airbnb country. Again, how many thousand windmills or 1,000 solar panels do you need to replace a coal-fire, nuclear or gas power plant? You know and I know it's way more than the single gas, nuclear or coal-fired power plant that could be built around Australia. But because the people who make the decisions don't live in the areas where the landscape changes, like places like Ballarat, where remember, as I've told you before, the Victorian government, to make people feel better in Melbourne, are going to put a whole bunch of wind farms towards the north of Victoria. To get the power back, they have to send it through massive transmission cables that go over prime agricultural land, including places like around Ballarat, where the people who grow the potatoes for almost all of the French fries that are sold in Australia when it comes to McDonald's or chip manufacturers, frozen chip people like McCain, Their compensation for these dirty big power lines being put over their properties, well, it only extends to the bits of the metal tower that actually touch the ground, not the cables that go over the top. Yet again, regional people have to pay for the luxuries of the city. And then they think because we're having the Commonwealth Games in regional Victoria, you'll forget and you'll vote for us. Please don't.